What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Gridiron podcast. And Super Bowl is right around the corner. We'll get into the Super Bowl later in this episode, but let's get straight into this episode. Now, Mike, we got some news coming out of the NFC North. Obviously, the Minnesota Vikings fire their general manager, Kawasi Adolfo Mensa. I'm probably butchering the name, but neither of us saw this coming.
Yeah, I didn't expect it, but when I found out the reasoning as to why, it makes a lot of sense. The reason that I saw, I hope someone can fact check me on this, which I was reading up on it, and it seems to be true. Kevin O'Connell wanted to trade JJ McCarthy to the Raiders, I believe, last year or before this season started, and re sign Sam Darnold, but the GM did not. And I'm super curious as to why. Because you just had Sam Darnold, who proved himself who could win on this football team. And then you have JJ McCarthy at the time, who is a unknown. So why, as a GM, would you risk your job? That just made no sense to me. And honestly, he deserves it.
Yeah, I can see it from both point of views, obviously, because you draft him in the first round. I think he was ninth overall pick, I want to say, right around that area. But you draft him in the first round, you pay him that much capital with a first round pick. You don't want to trade away a first round pick the year after he's drafted, especially if he didn't play that year, right? He was benched the entire year due to injury. In my opinion, they should have done what we said at the beginning of this year, kept Sam Darnold and had JJ McCarthy learn under him, because that would have allowed Sam Darnold to stay on the Vikings and keep that chemistry with his wide receivers. And they just previously, the year before, went 14-3 in the regular season, and allowed JJ McCarthy to learn under a veteran quarterback who has been in those situations where it's really good or really bad. Sam Darnold has had both of those in his career. But I mean, it's no surprise that after hearing the reasoning behind the firing, it makes sense, because you have a head coach like Kevin O'Connell who wants to keep his guy. He wants to keep his guy in Sam Darnold. And they had a really successful season the year prior. And the GM's just like, no, we're gonna go with our first overall pick, and we're gonna get rid of the guy that brought us to the playoffs this past year. And it brings up the question of, really, in terms of the NFC North, you've had good GMs over the past decade. You've had really bad GMs over the last decade. But that poses a really good question. Out of the four teams in the NFC North, we'll put Kawasi Adolfo Mensa in for the Vikings. Who has done the best job, in your opinion, during their tenure?
The perspective that I want to go on, trying to be non-biased here, is Brian Gutekunst. Okay, now this could be an interesting take because I'm gonna keep it a buck. His first round draft picks have not been great, but he has hit on those second, third, fourth, even seventh round picks like Carrington Valentine, maybe. But he has hit on a lot. So when you look at Ryan Poles, as of recently, granted, I'm gonna escape this last year draft because Ben Johnson was basically drafting.
Right.
Ryan Poles has struggled to draft in the middle of the rounds. He has not had a guy in the third, fourth, fifth, seventh round to actually come out and be a starter. I know you can speak on the Lions GM. I do know that they struggle in the draft, but in terms of roster moves, I do think that Brian Gutekunst has made probably some of the best moves in the NFC North. For example, bringing in Micah Parsons this past season. I know this is a time they're going all in. Drafted Jordan Love. The establishment that he has created about making the playoffs. They've been consistent for how many years now compared to all these other NFC North teams. I think there's a case to say that Brian Gutekunst has been probably one of the best GMs in the NFC North as of recently.
Now, here's my opinion. I would say it's pretty close between Brian Gutekunst and Brad Holmes. I would say it's pretty close between them two, just because I was going to say the Vikings GM is the best GM on earth for getting a guy like JJ McCarthy and really sticking it to him, right? Great GM, greatest GM of all time. Give it up for the Minnesota Vikings GM. But on a serious note, you mentioned draft, right? You, Brad Holmes's first day in office, he does two things. One, hires Dan Campbell to be the head coach. And two, trades away Matthew Stafford for Jared Goff and several draft picks. Those draft picks have turned into players like Jamison Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jack Campbell, and Sam Laporta, including also some people that we got rid of, like Hendon Hooker, Ifeatu Melifonwu, like those guys. Even Kirby Joseph, his draft pick was part of that. So then you mentioned middle of the rounds, right? In the fourth round alone in 2021, you got Amon-Ra St. Brown and Derek Barnes, two key people for the Detroit Lions. And in 1 year alone, they were able to get players like Penei Sewell, and then they followed up with Jamison Williams. Then they followed it up with Aiden Hutchinson. There have been some questionable draft picks here and there, right? Like you think of players like Broderick Martin for the Lions or Hendon Hooker. Like those two guys have really been the question marks. And then the biggest question mark in terms of draft picks when it happened was picking Jahmyr Gibbs at 12th overall. And we both know how that panned out. Jahmyr Gibbs, at least the top 3 running back in the league, one of the best already all time for the Lions in terms of stats. So he's a good person to have as a first overall or a first round draft pick. And that same year, they got Jack Campbell, Sam Laporta, and Brian Branch with their first 4 picks. If that's not a good draft class, I don't know what is. Because he's done really well in the draft, right? We constantly hear trust Brad Holmes in the draft. He may have some of those questionable draft picks in the first, second round. I'm thinking back to not this previous draft, but the year before when it was in Detroit, taking Ennis Rakestraw in the second round, who has yet to touch the field in 2 years. And obviously, talking about Green Bay, you mentioned bringing in Micah Parsons, him working that trade with the Dallas Cowboys camp was a really good move out of the GM. That's where the difference between the Green Bay Packers GM and Brian Gutekunst. I know I'm saying that last name wrong.
Yeah.
But that's the difference between him and Brad Holmes. Really, the only big move that we've seen from Brad Holmes mid-season is when Aiden Hutchinson went down last year, and we saw them bring in Zadarius Smith. Besides that, he really hasn't done much in terms of trade deadline or any free agency aspects in terms of bringing in really key players. I mean, you can name a couple like Amik Roberson. DJ Reed was decent when he was healthy. So you have those guys that here and there have been pretty good in terms of free agency, but we haven't really seen it out of the Detroit Lions camp. But I would say it's pretty tight between the Packers GM and the Lions GM.
Where I would give the edge to Brad Holmes over Brian Gutekunst is the shift in culture. I think well, like you said, when he immediately made that trade of Stafford to Goff, people were confused. I at the time was like,
It's
"What in
very
the
confused.
world?" Like I was thinking this was a downgrade. I mean, I for both teams it kind of made sense now. I mean, hindsight. But I think overall with Dan Campbell, I think he just shifted the organization in a culture that it just changed the whole franchise. You know, the 15-2 season. I mean, as you said, the draft picks that turned out from that Goff Stafford trade, he hit on almost all of those, which is crazy. I can definitely give it to Brad Holmes. I definitely think in terms of culture and the change and how I look at the Lions now compared to what I did about 10 years ago, it's not the same team. It's not the same
And
franchise.
5 years ago.
So I will say that's where I'll give Brad Holmes the edge. Brian Gutekunst has done a good job of just the transition from the Aaron Rodgers era to the Jordan Love era, keeping it consistent and still, having a winning football team at the end of the day. I mean, that's what they want. But in terms of the culture, like I said, give it to Brad Holmes all day.
Now, this is going to be a very interesting question that I have for you because this is really going to put our minds in terms of the GM position, right?
Ready?
If you can steal one player from each team, minus for you the Packers and minus me for the Lions, if you could steal one player from each NFC North team, who would that be and why?
So I'm just gonna go off the one that I know for sure. The Chicago Bears, I'm taking Jalen Johnson. The Packers need a corner desperately, and this is where Brian Gutekunst did not make a good free agent signing with Nate Hobbs. Total bust, I think. His knee injury, he's been injured all season. He hasn't played up to what I thought he could potentially get up to. So I will take Jalen Johnson, number one corner, pair him up with, Keyshawn Nixon and Carrington Valentine. At least make our secondary respectable in a way. I think for the Minnesota Vikings, I'm going to take Dallas Turner. I think the Packers could just use more depth on that defensive line. As one guy goes down, you need a next man up. So if Dallas Turner's on that defensive line with Micah Parsons, Devontae Wyatt, that is a scary defensive line who can probably stop the run for sure. I'd hope so. I would hope so. Nick, on your Detroit Lions, who am I going to take?
I feel like I have a couple in mind for you.
I'm torn right now between two players. I want you to guess if you can guess those two players.
I mean, obviously, I would say probably number one is probably Aiden Hutchinson.
Okay.
The second one probably being Amon-Ra St. Brown, just with the number of receivers that you guys have and wide receivers still kind of being a need for you guys in terms of depth. Amon-Ra St. Brown, I would say those two are probably your top two picks. I would be surprised if you said anything other than those two.
Be surprised. I actually am pretty solidified with the Packers wide receiver core now, despite they might lose Romeo Dobbs in the offseason. But if we're keeping what it is right now, I'm fine with that. I'm gonna go with Jahmyr Gibbs. Packers need another running back. I'm sure you didn't see that one coming. Behind Josh
He
Jacobs,
was
there's
he
no
was
depth.
third. He was third for me.
Yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs is a ferocious runner. I mean, if the Packers had him and Josh Jacobs, I mean, my goodness, what a dangerous combo that would be. I'm curious to hear what your players are now. Who are you stealing from my Green Bay Packers, Nick?
Yeah, so I'll start off with the Green Bay Packers. I am going to take your favorite player probably right now, that being Micah Parsons.
Actually, not my
I
favorite player.
hmm, I I think having Micah Parsons opposite Aiden Hutchinson, and then having a guy also like Al Qadim Muhammad and the edge rushing core, along with defensive tackles like DJ Reader, Aleem McNeil, Tyleek Williams, Roy Lopez, to name a couple. I think that would be a very dangerous defensive line, which is something that we have seen the Lions need over the last couple of years, especially that other edge rushing position alongside Aiden Hutchinson. So I would have to say Micah Parsons, just because I said in the offseason that I wanted Micah Parsons, and obviously he goes to Green Bay Packers, but I would say I would take Micah Parsons from the Green Bay Packers. Now, the Bears is an interesting one because you took Jalen Johnson. I wanted him. I'm not going to copy your pick, but I'm going to go with Kevin Byard because he is one of those guys that is very nose to the ball. He's a lot like if you were to put a corner position in terms of Brian Branch. He is a lot like Brian Branch in terms of going towards the football, making big plays, getting tackles for loss like we saw in the playoff game against the Rams. I would have to say him because we need that depth at corner. Obviously, you can also slot him in as a nickel if need be, but we need that depth in terms of corner. Just
Wait,
I
Byard plays safety on the Bears.
Yeah, but we already have two top safeties. I would slot him in at corner
A
or even
corner
nickel
position. Wow, okay.
because I'm not going to take your pick. That's why I would say 9 times out of 10, I would say Jalen Johnson, but because I know what type of secondary player Kevin Byard is in terms of like that hard nose, get to the football type of player. I can probably slot him in at corner or even put him at safety and slot Ranch to corner like he played his rookie year. There's ways that we can move it around. But the Minnesota Vikings, this is a tough one for me because you know what? Because I'm not going to go based off of what the Lions roster looks like right now. I'm going to go based off what I'm seeing in terms of roster moves. I'm going to go with Andrew Van Ginkel to replace Alex Anzalone because even though Van Ginkel is an outside linebacker, that's what really Anzalone played this year with Jack Campbell kind of moving into that middle linebacker spot. And he's a guy that can come off the edge as well. He's a guy that applies pressure. And in my opinion, he's much better in coverage than Alex Anzalone is. And you got to keep someone with the Thor haircut, right? You
Yeah.
got to keep someone with the Thor haircut. So I would go with Andrew Van Ginkel. It was a toss up between potentially having Harrison Smith for a year. It was a Dallas Turner type of thing, but I wasn't going to copy your answer again. So I'm going to go with Andrew Van Ginkel just with linebacker depth being a question for the Lions right now, with Malcolm Rodriguez coming off of injury. Potentially, I mean, he's a unrestricted free agent this year. You have Alex Anzalone, who's an unrestricted free agent, and then you have really Jack Campbell and Derek Barnes are those two other guys.
I want to ask you now. Let's do it from the lens of Chicago Bears and Minnesota Vikings. So if you're Ryan Poles or the Vikings interim GM, who are you taking?
In terms of like who I would take from the Lions
Each team.
and
Just what we
each
did.
team.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll pretend I'm Minnesota essentially. So Lions,
I think there's only one right answer to the Vikings right now.
yeah, Gibbs.
I was going to say a quarterback, man.
A quarterback. I mean,
Yeah. I was gonna go with like
They
Love or
also need a running
Goff.
back. They also need a running back.
They do need a
So
running back.
I'll do this. Ready? This is gonna pair into what you're saying. So I'm gonna go with Gibbs because I think Gibbs is probably the best running back in the division by far.
Yeah.
And then from the Packers, I'm going to take Jordan Love
Split the difference.
because if I had to pick one, I would say keep Jared Goff and Jameer Gibbs together just with the dynamic that they have. But if I had to pick one player from each team, I'm going to go Gibbs for the Lions. I'm going to go with Jordan Love for the Packers. And then from the Bears, the Luther Burden.
Another wide receiver 3. They do need a 3 spot. If I'm the Vikings GM, I'm gonna go with the QB position. I mean, Love or Goff, split the difference. Well, okay, I'll take Love just for the sake of having to do one from each team. From Detroit,
Don't
I'm
copy
going
my
to
answer.
take. Dude, they do need a running back so bad. You know
There's
what?
another running back on the Detroit Lions roster that is decent if they actually use him.
You know what? I'll go the other direction. I'll take Penei Sewell, build up that offensive line. And from the what's the other team? Bears. If I'm the Vikings from the Bears, I am taking. Ooh, I do want to say. Oh,
There's
Monangai.
a Yeah, I was gonna say
Monangai, yeah. I mean, all day. And then from the flip side, if I'm the Bears, I'm looking at each NFC North team. From the Vikings, ooh. Well, they do need more tackles, so I'll take Will Fries. From the Packers, I'm taking Edrian Cooper, the linebacker. From the Lions, who's the line? Is it who's the Lions' right tackle?
Taylor Decker
Is it Decker's solid, right? He had a good year last year, or no? No. Who was I thinking of for the
I mean,
Lions?
you can say
Oh
Sewell and flip him because
no.
he played right tackle in college.
You know what? No, actually, the Bears have freaking Komet and Loveland. Dang it! I was gonna say a tight end, but
You
I
were
was gonna
gonna
say
say Laporta.
Laporta, but I mean Komet could be on his way out. So you know what? I'll go Laporta and just call it a day.
All right, if I were the Bears, I would say from the Lions, Panay.
Build up that offensive line.
From the Packers, hmm, this is a tough one.
They do need edge rushers. So I mean, if you say Micah again, that would not be nothing wrong with that.
I'll go with Micah.
Or Devontae Wyatt would be decent. Yeah,
Micah.
yeah.
And then the Minnesota Vikings, they're solid on wide receivers. They're solid on tight ends. Ooh, Dallas Turner.
Good pick there. Yeah, that was actually pretty tough. I'm not gonna lie, that was pretty tough. But could you imagine some of these rosters if some of these players were on these teams? Holy moly!
Salary cap's going up.
Yeah,
Salaries cap going
that
up.
that is something we do got to talk about in the future. Because wow,
And they're adding a game in Paris this next year as well.
that's another topic for another day.
But as of the day of recording, we are just 5 days away from the big dance, the Super Bowl. Now, I know we were talking about going live. Unfortunately, we will unable to be going live. I will be spending time with family, watching the Super Bowl, and then probably not watching the halftime show. I'm not a huge fan of the halftime shows the last couple of years, but that's just me. But we got to talk about this because I know we mentioned the Vikings GM, There's a former Vikings player going to be playing in the Super Bowl, and he's favored by 4.5 points going into it. That being Sam Darnold for the Seattle Seahawks facing off against Drake May and the New England Patriots.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I'm not as excited as maybe some other people might be. Now, I am interested to watch this Patriots team because I'm interested to watch Drake May. I haven't watched a ton of Drake May this season. I have watched glimpses and caught a couple games here and there, but not too much. And it looks like he did have a good season despite having an easy schedule, and what a way to the Super Bowl that is. Probably never going to happen again.
Probably not.
And I am interested in that Patriots defense. I know they did add a lot this past offseason to it, and I like Christian Gonzalez, that corner they got. So I am interested to see what this young Patriots team can do. I mean, they do have a young wide receiver core minus Stephon Diggs. It is a interesting team versus a Seattle team who they are more veteran, I guess you could say, compared to the Patriots. There are,
Besides for a couple key players in terms of
yeah,
JSN and
right.
Witherspoon.
So it will be an interesting contest of Sam Darnold versus Drake May. I'm actually kind of excited to watch that matchup and see who does better. So it'll be very fun to watch, actually.
Yeah, and it's the battle of two of the best defenses in the league. That
Yeah.
being essentially the Legion of Boom 2.0 for the Seattle Seahawks, and then a star-studded secondary for the Patriots. Obviously, Christian Gonzalez. They add Carlton Davis from the Detroit Lions this past offseason, and they've been doing really good. I believe they're third overall in terms of turnovers for the season. So it's going to be very interesting. You got a young core for the Patriots against a veteran ship of the Seattle Seahawks. Now, I do want to say one thing. There are a couple of things in terms of going into the off season that both of these teams have to discuss. Obviously, it's coming out that potentially after the Super Bowl, the Seattle Seahawks will be sold to new ownership. Now, what that exactly means in terms of the stadium, in terms of the team name, in terms of the roster itself, is up to determination as of this point. But there are rumors, and I believe it's been somewhat confirmed, that the Seattle Seahawks will, yeah, they'll be going for sale after the Super Bowl. It's about 50% confirmed right now, just with the previous owner. I believe he passed away back in 2018.
Wow. I actually did not know that. That is news to me as you are telling me this. Did not know that. That's actually crazy. I was going to touch on another point, but if you want to add more to that, that is totally fine with me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of craziness going around in terms of a lot of these teams. Obviously, with Seattle potentially going up for sale, and then there's the rumors of the Chicago Bears moving to Gary, Indiana. There's a bunch of different things going on in terms of what's going to be happening this offseason. But I want to get your opinion on the potential sale of the Seattle Seahawks. Do we see them stay in Seattle? Because we've seen Seattle lose a major four sports team before. We've seen them lose the Seattle Supersonics, who moved to Oklahoma City in terms of basketball. And does their roster stay the same, even if they win the Super Bowl? Or do you see it changing drastically in terms of the new ownership?
I don't think the roster will be that much different. I do know there are key couple free agents like Tariq Woolen, who is up.
Kenneth
And
Walker.
I'm sure there will be some other teams that will outbid the Seahawks, but I don't see a crazy change in a lot of guys. Now, back to the sale, back to Seattle. So this is interesting because whenever I think about the West Coast, I immediately think about Seattle. Now I know there's California, but I mean, obviously with the Packers' history and the Seahawks, that's just immediately what I think about is Seattle. Losing Seattle would be just drastic, I think, to the NFL. There's nothing really special about Seattle, you could say, but it's just like kind of like the location of it. I'm not sure
Good
exactly.
sports city too. It's a
Yeah, I
really
was gonna
good
say they
sports
have a
city.
lot of crazy fans. I mean, they go hard for the Seahawks. Plus, didn't the stadium, if I'm not mistaken, get renovated recently or no? My
I want to say it was like 3 years ago.
So pretty recently. So that's kind of crazy that this is kind of going to happen. I hope they don't move out of Seattle because that would just be awful, honestly. I don't know where you're going to relocate to who needs, a sports team because you're not going to move in the Midwest because there's nothing really popping like that that'll give you like the Seattle numbers, I don't think.
Yeah, I would think maybe the furthest east you would go is probably Salt Lake City. I think
Utah?
realistically, yeah,
Oh, you're talking about from Seattle. Okay, I thought you were talking about the East
yeah,
Coast. Yeah, I mean,
because you still probably have to stay in the NFC West because it's
yeah.
going to be very hard to kind of switch around the divisions. But I will
Well,
say I think the furthest you go east from Seattle is probably Salt Lake City because one, it's a good sports town, two, it's a big market,
yeah.
and
Eh,
three, Utah doesn't even have a team.
yeah, I was just going to add on to that quickly. Utah just acquired, well, obviously, when the Arizona Coyotes left the NHL, they got the Utah Mammoth, so they rebranded to that. They also,
Mm-hmm.
I think the Utah Jazz's stadium, I don't know if they renovated it or did something like that. I could be totally
They
wrong about that.
completely changed it.
Yeah,
They changed
okay.
it completely.
So, yeah, Utah, as you said, is a booming market right now to go into. So maybe that is a possibility, but does Utah Seahawks or something like that sound good? I mean, will they completely change the Seahawks
They would
name?
if they moved to Utah, they would change the name
That's
100%.
that's unfortunate.
Yeah. So, but I do want to quickly get kind of our predictions for the Super Bowl. I know we kind of touched on it a little bit going into last week, but I want to get your predictions because now that we know Seattle essentially favored by 4.5 and New England having to travel from Massachusetts to California, the whole different time zone. We see how it happens with teams here and there with jet lag and everything like that. Do we see a potential blowout
There is a good possibility. Now, define a blowout. Is that by 10? Is that by 13?
by 13? Do we see them a team winning by 13?
I can definitely see it. There's a good chance for that. I think Seattle's defense is ferocious. I think if Seattle comes out hot, there's a good chance this game could be over quick.
Yeah, I will say this. I think whoever wins the turnover battle is going to win this game because you have two solid offenses and you have two really good defenses. So whoever wins that turnover battle and that time of possession battle is really going to take this game by storm. I will say I think we both agree that Seattle's probably going to win. And I will say Seattle 28, New England 14.
Say 29-18. It's always a weird score, I swear, every single time. I always want to go like
Yeah,
those generic, 27-20, but it's always just something weird. Something always fluky happens. So 29-18, give it to the Seahawks. Sam Darnold.
31-25. Somehow
Yeah,
they're going to get to 25.
right. It's just something weird, yeah. Sam Darnold, I don't know if he's gonna be I mean, if he wins, is he the MVP over JSN? I think so.
Ooh, that's tough because JSN's stats are going to be determined by Sam Darnold.
I mean, if Darnold throws like 330, like 4 touchdowns,
Well, how many times have we actually seen a wide receiver win Super Bowl MVP in the last 20 years? Not a lot. It's
yeah.
normally quarterbacks or a defensive player. So it's going to be either Sam Darnold or JSN. It has to be one of those
Yeah, I think
two.
it'll be Sam Darnold. I mean, just looking back, I actually just pulled it up. It's been all QBs. There's been a corner, one wide receiver. It's been all
Was that
quarterbacks. We're talking back in like Hines Ward, Pittsburgh Steelers day. Julian
that's
Edelman
a
did once, Cooper Cup. I mean, but for the most part, it's all QBs though. So you have to have, and it's a ridiculous season if you're a wide receiver. So I think Sam Darnold is just your guy.
But yeah, that's going to do it for this week's episode. Thank you guys for tuning in again. We do apologize of not being live on the Super Bowl coming up, but we will be doing a recap of the Super Bowl next week. We post episodes every single Thursday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, YouTube, and make sure to subscribe if you guys haven't already. Go down and subscribe. It takes 5 seconds. It severely helps us pump out more content, and we will be doing more shorts and potential more live streams in the off season. So stay tuned for that. Stay tuned to our Twitter at Gridiron Pod NFL, and we'll see you guys in the next one.